Welcome to the Biotech Executive Brief, your daily rundown of the developments shaping artificial intelligence, pharma and life sciences, and the broader business landscape. Each episode focuses on the specific news executives should have on their radar, from AI models and infrastructure to clinical development, biotech deal-making, manufacturing, capital markets, and major shifts across the global economy. If you find these updates useful, subscribe to the Biotech Executive Brief to get daily updates on the industry and stay current on the developments that matter most. Today's brief covers Monday, August 24th, 2026. Let's start with artificial intelligence, where Alibaba is making it very clear that it intends to compete across nearly every layer of the AI stack. Alibaba officially launched Wan3.0, its latest AI video generation model, just one day after announcing a roughly $10.2 billion equity raise dedicated to AI investment. Those two announcements are closely connected. Alibaba isn't simply investing in models. It's putting capital behind a broader strategy spanning AI models, chips, infrastructure, and deployment. The financing is significant enough that we'll come back to it in the business section, because investors weren't exactly thrilled about the dilution. But from a technology perspective, Wan3.0 is another concrete example of Alibaba expanding its proprietary generative AI portfolio while committing billions of dollars to the infrastructure behind it. OpenAI, meanwhile, is continuing its push toward AI agents. The company is working to move agents beyond software development applications and into broader consumer and enterprise workflows. The idea is increasingly familiar. Rather than simply generating an answer, an AI system performs multiple steps toward completing a task. That distinction matters because the success of agents will depend on more than model intelligence. They have to work reliably, they have to integrate with applications people already use, and users have to trust them enough to actually give those systems permission to act. And today's brief includes a good example of why that last point is becoming so important. Instinct, an AI assistant attracting attention for its ability to operate across applications, is also generating privacy and cybersecurity concerns because of the level of access required to make those capabilities possible. The more an agent can do, the more information and systems it may need permission to access. That creates an unavoidable trade-off. Giving an AI assistant access to calendars, communications, applications, documents, or other services can make it substantially more useful. But those permissions also make security, governance, and data protection much more important. So OpenAI's push toward broader agents and the concerns surrounding Instinct really represent two sides of the same development. AI systems are becoming more capable of taking action, and that makes controlling those actions increasingly important. There was also potentially significant consolidation news around one of the most important platforms in the OpenAI ecosystem. Hugging Face is reportedly fielding acquisition interest at a valuation of around $13 billion. Hugging Face has become a central platform for open models, datasets, and developer collaboration. A transaction at that valuation will highlight just how strategically valuable the distribution and infrastructure around OpenAI has become. Investor interest is also moving aggressively into physical AI. General Intuition raised new capital at a reported $6 billion valuation, with backing from Valor and Point72. The company is developing foundation models designed to help AI systems understand movement through space and time, with robotics among the major target applications. That's another sign that robotics is emerging as an important frontier for foundation model development. The first wave of generative AI largely happened on screens. Companies like General Intuition are betting that increasingly capable models can eventually become much more useful in the physical world. AI is also moving further into defense. Britain and Ukraine signed a partnership to jointly develop AI tools connected with battlefield technology and military decision support. That agreement reflects how governments are beginning to move from experimenting with AI toward integrating it into operational defense capabilities. And that brings us directly into another geopolitical issue: controlling access to the hardware behind advanced AI. Taiwanese prosecutors indicted 9 people over the alleged illegal export of AI servers to China. The case comes as governments increase enforcement around advanced computing hardware and technology transfer restrictions. AI servers and semiconductors are no longer simply commercial products. They are increasingly part of national security and industrial policy, which means companies operating across those supply chains are navigating a much more complicated geopolitical environment. There was also an interesting enterprise AI story from Thomson Reuters. The company is developing more of its own AI capability as it looks to reduce its dependence on expensive third-party models, including Anthropic's Claude. Thomson Reuters is incorporating open-source technology into its legal and information products, giving us another example of how enterprise AI architecture may evolve. For some companies, the answer may not be to send every workload to a single frontier model provider. Businesses with valuable proprietary data may increasingly combine external models, open-source technology, and internally adapted systems, depending on the use case and economics. The labor market is adapting too. Research examining 29.4 million professional profiles found workers increasingly adding AI-related skills to their LinkedIn histories, while references to areas such as remote work and DEI are declining. That doesn't necessarily mean millions of people suddenly became AI engineers, but it does show how employees are changing the way they describe their experience as employer demand shifts toward AI capabilities. And finally, OpenAI announced that GPT 5.6 is now available through Kiro, expanding the model family into another agentic software development environment. That keeps price performance and model selection firmly in focus as developers build AI-native engineering workflows. So today's AI section covers a lot of ground. Alibaba launched Wan3.0 following a massive AI capital raise. OpenAI continues expanding agents. Instinct is raising questions around privacy and permissions. Hugging Face could potentially command a $13 billion acquisition price. General Intuition is attracting billions in valuation around physical AI. And governments are increasingly treating AI capabilities and hardware as strategic national security assets. Now let's move into pharma and life sciences, where obesity leads the day. Roche agreed to a deal worth up to $2.5 billion for Hanmi Pharmaceuticals' clinical stage obesity drug. Roche will pay $190 million upfront for the asset, which targets the UCN2 pathway. That mechanism is important because Roche is adding another approach to obesity beyond the more conventional incretin strategies dominating much of the market. The obesity pipeline is becoming increasingly diverse as pharmaceutical companies search for differentiated mechanisms, dosing approaches, and combinations that can compete in what has become one of the industry's most important therapeutic markets. There was more difficult news for Regenxbio. The FDA placed the company's RGX-121 Hunter syndrome gene therapy study on clinical hold after small spinal masses were observed in 5 patients. The hold interrupts Regenxbio's plan to refile the therapy for regulatory review. It also reinforces the importance of long-term safety monitoring in gene therapy, particularly as companies and regulators continue learning about potential effects that may emerge after treatment. In oncology, attention remains firmly on Moderna and Merck, following the successful late-stage melanoma results for their personalized mRNA cancer vaccine. Today's brief looked at how the program evolved from earlier clinical signals into what has become an important validation point for personalized mRNA oncology. For Moderna in particular, the results strengthened the argument that mRNA technology can expand meaningfully beyond infectious disease. Manufacturing provided a very different biotech story. Solaris is planning workforce reductions after losing a major pharmaceutical customer. The company has been building manufacturing capabilities around cell therapy, but the loss of a large customer illustrates one of the risks facing advanced therapy CDMOs. Capacity can be expensive to build, and individual customer programs can represent significant volumes. If one of those programs disappears, the effect can move quickly into utilization, revenue expectations, and staffing. Commercialization is also becoming a bigger focus at Daiichi Sankyo. The company promoted Ken Keller to lead a new commercialization organization as Daiichi works toward its goal of becoming a top 5 oncology company by 2035. Daiichi has built a significant oncology pipeline, and the organizational change puts additional emphasis on translating that pipeline into commercial growth. Drug pricing produced another significant development. Courts rejected separate challenges from Merck and AstraZeneca targeting Medicare's drug price negotiation program. The rulings preserve another portion of the federal framework, allowing Medicare to negotiate prices for selected medicines. For large pharmaceutical companies, the issue remains strategically important because pricing policy can directly affect the economics of major commercial products. Capital markets are also in focus for Hansa Biopharma. The company is considering a NASDAQ listing as it approaches an FDA decision for its kidney transplant therapy. A U.S. listing could give Hansa broader access to capital at exactly the point when the company may need to prepare for commercialization. QIAGEN, meanwhile, finally has permanent leadership after a 9-month search. The molecular diagnostics company appointed Jonathan M. Pratt as CEO. The appointment brings some leadership stability as QIAGEN competes across diagnostics and life sciences tools. There was also regulatory progress for Spruce Biosciences. The company said productive discussions with the FDA have cleared additional steps toward a fourth-quarter filing for its ultra-rare disease candidate. Manufacturing preparation remains one of the pieces that needs to come together before submission. And finally, TME Pharma said its search for a partner for its brain cancer program is nearing completion. For smaller biotechnology companies, partnerships can provide both development support and financing for programs that would otherwise require significant amounts of internal capital. So the pharma picture today includes Roche making another multi-billion-dollar obesity bet, Regenxbio confronting a gene therapy safety hold, continued momentum around Moderna and Merck's personalized cancer vaccine, restructuring at cell therapy manufacturer Cellares, and significant developments around commercialization, drug pricing, regulatory strategy, and biotech financing. Now let's finish with the broader business landscape. Alibaba is back at the top of the list. Shares fell after the company launched its $10.2 billion Hong Kong share placement at a significant discount to the previous close. Alibaba plans to use the proceeds entirely for AI investment. Strategically, that supports the aggressive AI expansion we discussed earlier. Financially, investors have to absorb the dilution. That tension is becoming increasingly common across the AI investment cycle. Companies see enormous opportunity, but building the infrastructure and models required to compete can consume enormous amounts of capital. Shein also moved toward the public markets. The fast fashion company launched its Hong Kong IPO, seeking to raise up to $1.77 billion at a valuation near $27 billion. That valuation is roughly 70% below Shein's 2022 private market peak. Slower growth, tariff changes, competition, and regulatory scrutiny have all contributed to a very different valuation environment for the company. Trade policy is another major theme today. President Donald Trump threatened 50% tariffs on Canadian-made cars, trucks, and automotive parts beginning January 1, 2027, following the collapse of U.S. Canada trade negotiations. The automotive supply chain between the two countries is deeply integrated, so tariffs at that level could have substantial implications for manufacturers operating across the border. The United States is also reportedly considering a 7.5% tariff on Chinese goods tied to concerns around excess manufacturing capacity ahead of planned high-level talks between Washington and Beijing. Reuters noted that it could not independently verify that report, but the broader direction is clear. Trade friction remains elevated across several of the world's largest economies. Monetary policy is also back in focus ahead of Jackson Hole. Federal Reserve Chair Kevin Warsh is preparing for his first Jackson Hole address as investors look for signals around inflation, interest rates, and long-term bond yields. Those yields remain elevated, making the Fed's message particularly important for corporate borrowing and asset valuations. The Treasury is also taking action in the bond market. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent said the government will maintain its regular debt auction schedule while increasing buybacks of longer-dated securities beginning in September. The goal is to support liquidity while the market navigates high yields and rising federal debt service costs. Stocks finished lower as well. The S&P 500 and NASDAQ declined as semiconductor and technology shares weakened, with investors looking ahead to Nvidia earnings and inflation data. That makes the next set of technology results particularly important given how much of the market's AI optimism is tied to continued infrastructure spending. And finally, oil remains elevated. Reuters analysis pointed to shrinking global inventories, disruptions around the Strait of Hormuz, and declining emergency reserves as factors that could keep crude prices in the low $90 range or potentially establish a higher floor. That matters across transportation, manufacturing, consumer spending, and broader inflation. And that wraps up the Biotech Executive Brief for Monday, August 24th, 2026. Across AI, Alibaba launched Wan3.0 while committing billions more to its AI strategy. OpenAI continues pushing toward agents. Hugging Face is reportedly attracting acquisition interest around $13 billion. And robotics, enterprise models, defense applications, and AI hardware controls are all moving quickly. Across pharma and life sciences, Roche made a potential $2.5 billion obesity deal. Regenxbio faced another gene therapy safety setback. Moderna and Merck's cancer vaccine success remained in focus, and companies across manufacturing, oncology, rare disease, and diagnostics made strategic moves. And across business, Alibaba's massive capital raise pressured its shares, Shein moved toward a Hong Kong IPO at a substantially lower valuation, trade tensions intensified, bond markets remained under pressure, and technology stocks weakened ahead of another important round of AI-related earnings. If your organization is navigating AI, digital transformation, manufacturing technology, or technology strategy within life sciences, Sternbridge Technology Consulting helps biotech executives translate emerging technologies and industry developments into practical strategy and execution. Subscribe to the Biotech Executive Brief to stay current on the developments shaping artificial intelligence, pharma and life sciences, and the broader business landscape. Thanks for listening to the Biotech Executive Brief from Sternbridge Technology Consulting.